language is quite appropriate at age 17. That was the age I started using. So I would say my emotions got arrested there for as long as my addiction festered. And then continually surrender these hobbling demands. I need to surrender it every day, and I'm often reluctant to surrender. It's a continuous practice, and I sometimes I still just want to hide. I just don't want to be in the fray, and I don't want to allow that flexibility to kind of like change with my circumstances. I want to just stake a claim and just you know make the world bend around me, but it doesn't work that way. And I often fall hard when I try to approach life through that framework. So I'm a work in progress.
Yes, you are, and so are we all, aren't we? But you said something that's so true. See, that's where when we think of this as a practice, right? It is an ongoing evolution in terms of our recovery. And it really is continuing to surrender these things. And you've heard me talk about this before, Patrick. Some of these demands we have, they're low-hanging fruit. They become pretty obvious, right? And when we start doing this work and say, yeah, God, I expected that person to do this, and that's why I'm getting so upset about this. And they didn't do it the way I wanted them to do it, or they didn't do it in a timely manner that I wanted them to do it, or whatever the expectation was. But then what the interesting process is that later on, after you pick that low-hanging fruit, then I've started to realize there's some stuff that's out of my awareness that are these demands I have that go very deep and have very deep roots, and are sometimes more difficult to identify than the ones that are low-hanging fruit. It's like by repressing them or whatever happens that puts them in our unconscious, they get camouflaged. It's like it's harder to find them. Where are they? Where are they hidden? And how do I identify them and stuff like that? So it's an interesting process though, and that's one of the things that makes this to me so exciting, because our discoveries go on and on and on, which I think is really, really exciting, is that we start to build, you know, a whole kind of, you know, fund of knowledge about these expectations we have. And that fund keeps growing and growing and growing. I wish my IRA grew like that, Patrick. That
Me
would be
too.
wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for reading tonight. Well, we are now starting. We've got three more. In boxing, the last three rounds are called the championship rounds. Rounds 10, 11, and 12. And we are at the 10th insight, right, for emotional sobriety. And this one is having to do with healing through forgiveness. So this week and for the next several weeks, we're going to really be digging into and talking about forgiveness, the importance of it. That's what I'm going to start with tonight. We're going to also be focusing on the quality, what has to happen for forgiveness to be experienced in our lives. But let me first talk about the importance of it and put it in the context of emotional sobriety and how come I included this as one of the insights. One way of thinking about emotional sobriety is to think that when there is an appropriate balance and coordination of all of what we are going to be able to function in the best possible way in our life. Emotional sobriety can be thought of as optimal functioning in life, as optimal recovery. emotional sobriety is dependent on that appropriate balance and coordination. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that the more I have available, all of me, the better I can wholeheartedly respond to a situation. Unfortunately, what has happened for all of us is we've become fragmented through our development in life and through different experiences we've had in life. That fragmentation means that those areas that are fragmented in my person are unavailable to be balanced and coordinated because there's a fragmentation. I can only balance and coordinate those aspects that I have been integrated into who I am as a person. So when we talk about emotional sobriety, we are talking about recovering, all of us. Recovering means getting back those parts of us that we've lost. One way that we've become fragmented is by having unfinished business. When we have a grievance, when we have a resentment towards someone, when there is a lack of forgiveness for whatever has happened in a situation that has either disappointed us, traumatized us in some way, harmed us in some way, then until that issue becomes resolved, it's going to remain fragmented and not integrated in our life. Now, what has to take place for something to be integrated? And look, our whole life is about the integration of experience. You only grow through integration. And integration is always a result of failing and frustration and making mistakes. That's how we learned to walk when we were toddlers. Is we stood up and we pulled ourselves up to the coffee table, we let go and we fell, and our body took that information that we gathered from falling and unable to balance ourselves and started to now create neural pathways to coordinate the brain and the motor strip and all these other parts of the brain that are necessary to be able to balance yourself in a three-dimensional plane, as well as to then coordinate your muscle movement in such a way where you can walk. It's a pretty amazing feat that we've accomplished when we were 1 year old. I mean, people that are doing robotics now are still trying to be able to figure out how to program a robot to be able to handle all of those situations and challenges that it takes to get a robot to walk close to what a human can do. They definitely do not look like the Terminator if you guys have watched Schwarzenegger's first movie, is Terminator. That robot would had a lot of abilities that we have not yet been able to program into a robot, because it's that challenging, it's that complex, and that's how remarkable we are. We have that ability to integrate our experiences into an unbelievable complex set of action and behavior. And I'm just talking about walking. That can be applied across the board. But when something happens in our life that leaves a residual, whether it's through a trauma, through a disappointment, through a betrayal, whatever it is, how we deal with that experience. And you've heard me say this before, it's the relationship we have to that experience that's going to determine if it is something that ultimately enhances our life by creating more wisdom, or does it diminish our life by creating bitterness and nihilism? See, when experiences are not integrated, they create a sense of bitterness. They create resentment. Resentment is going back over and over and over it. And the way that our mind is wired is that anything that's incomplete, we're going to be continuing to think about until it's taken care of. We call it the psychological imperative. If I say 1, 2, 3, you're going to think the number 4. If I go da, 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 you're going to put that last note in. Da. We are wired to move towards wholeness. That's that growth force that you've heard me talk about. So when we encounter an experience in our life that leaves us filled with resentment, it means that we have blocked ourselves in some way from going through or from flowing with what we would call the cycle of experience that's going to lead to some resolution. And how do we block it? By having a lot of these expectations about what should have happened. If I believe you shouldn't have been this way, and I believe that's the truth, and you violated a principle, and I can never forgive you for that, then that's going to be unresolved. I'm going to walk around carrying that bitterness with me the rest of my life. Now, some things are easier to forgive than others. There's no question about it. But if we are willing to really fully experience the pain that we have and be with someone when we're processing it that can help us look at the situation maybe in a different way than we've ever looked at it, we can start to integrate that experience and to move beyond resentment towards forgiveness. Now, we talk about forgiveness and we mostly think about it as forgiving other people for their transgressions against us. But today, I want you to think about this in a different way. I want to focus today's talk on the transgressions we've had towards ourselves, how we've treated ourselves, how we've cared for ourselves. Now, I'm going to ask each of you to just take a minute, and you can do this after we're done, but right now I'm going to ask you to reflect. I want you to think about writing a letter to your body. And being able to take responsibility for all the harm you've done to yourself physically through the years. And I want you to ask your body for forgiveness. Now, we can also do this same thing if I said, now look at your heart. Have you taken care of your heart well? Have you protected yourself? What have you done in terms of how you've taken care of that tender part of yourself? Do you need to make amends to yourself for that? How about your mind? What have you done with your mind? Do you put yourself down a lot? Do you denigrate yourself? Do you fault yourself when you make a mistake? Are you just so harsh and punitive that you call yourself names, that you call yourself stupid or a loser or dumb? How about in terms of behavior, accomplishments, achievement in life? What is your relationship like with yourself? And where do you need to ask for forgiveness? And then you take the other side. Can your body forgive you for what you've done? So now you look at the other side of the equation, not just how we need to ask for forgiveness, but what Will our body forgive us for the transgressions? Will our heart forgive us? Will our mind forgive us? Will our self-esteem forgive us? You see, this whole area of our relationship with ourselves and the lack of forgiveness that we have for ourselves is based on a deep sense of self-hate. That if we don't live up to the expectations we have about how we're supposed to be, that we unleash hell towards ourselves. When we don't live up to our expectations, we pay a heavy price. Rarely are we forgiving and understanding towards ourselves. Rarely do we support ourselves to learn from our mistakes. We get filled with so much shame that we should be something that we're not. If you're filled with shame, it means that you've rejected yourself and that you hate yourself, that you should not be who you are. How do you deal with that part of you that's thrown you away? Can you forgive that part of you? What would you want to say to that part of you? You see, it becomes very interesting when we start to think of ourselves in relationship to ourselves on either side, the part that's judging us or the side that's being judged. How do we deal with ourselves with these things? How do you handle that conflict that you have within yourself? One of the previous chapters, we talked about the top dog and the underdog. Top dog is the part of us that tells us how we should be. The underdog part says, you're right. I'm terrible. I'm a loser. How does that drama play out in your life? How does that dialogue play out for you? Now, if I am unable to have compassion and forgiveness for myself, do you think I can really give it to you? Of course I can't. I can't give you something I don't give myself. I can't treat you with a deep sense of understanding over something that's happened if I can't somehow do that with myself. This is what I mean about that this stuff has to get integrated, because if I am able to forgive myself for those things that I've done wrong, then I've got a much better chance of being able to forgive you. But if I'm still holding, still holding on to my grudges towards myself, it's going to be hard for me to loosen up and forgive you. It's not going to happen. I went to a trauma writing workshop, and it was very interesting thing is that it was really focused on trauma. And I realized how much I had traumatized myself by the abuse that I had caused or created in terms of how I treated my body. Just the way I drank was so reckless and poisoning myself. The harm that I would put myself in front of, like if you were with me in Vietnam, you would see some of the missions that I volunteered for, and the just the complete cavalier attitude I had about putting myself in harm's way over and over and over again. And it really revealed, the fact that I didn't care. I didn't think well of myself at all. I didn't care for myself. I didn't look out for myself. I acted with a reckless and irresponsible abandon towards myself. Well, you can imagine that needs to be dealt with if I'm going to have any kind of ability to have integrity. Thinking of integrity as wholeness. If I am not whole, I can't have integrity. If I am not whole, I cannot operate from all of me. If I am not whole, I can't find an appropriate balance and coordination of all that I am. So that's how we're going to begin this discussion. We're going to look at, first of all, our experience in terms of with ourselves, what we've done to ourselves, how to ask for forgiveness, and then take the other side and how can we give forgiveness. Now, I would encourage some of you to write this out. Write the letter to your body. What have you done to it? And then take your body and respond. Have your body respond to you and what you've done to it. How does your body feel about you and how you've treated it? Can your body get to a place of understanding? Well, it can, depending on how well you ask for forgiveness and you take responsibility. Then your body may be able to find a path. Anyway, enough said about that tonight. Why don't we invite Tom and Herb, if he's here, and start this discussion about our relationship with ourselves. Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Tom's muted. There he is. Can you unmute him?
hang in
Yeah,
there.
there you go. I couldn't unmute myself for a minute.
Yeah, that was me. Sorry. It had it locked down.
Damn it, Tom. I forgive you.
You want me on that wall, Tom. You need me on that wall.
I forgive you. Well, before we go any further, I just want to say that you said earlier that learning to walk is an amazing feat. I thought that's hilarious.
Oh, boy. That's good, Tom. I didn't think of it
I knew
that
you
way.
picked that one up.
It's the main thing I wrote down of all the things you said. It's like it was at the very top. Quick commercial. This is one of my books, the Self-Forgiveness Handbook. So that still exists out there. I just looked through it to see if I still believed what it said. I do. So if that can help.
What are some of the things you do in there, Tom?
Well, we do a lot of things. We break it down. I mean, I have formed around what I call the 7 components of self-forgiveness. So it's a process of getting ready to do that. Is because that's one of those. It's one of those things that it's like it's like motivation. There are certain things, forgiveness, self-forgiveness, motivation. These are things that if we're not careful, we don't even, it's sort of like what you were talking about a minute ago. We don't even realize that we think this way or we don't think this way. We act like they just exist or not. Somebody says, I mean, you get this all the time around treatment programs. Well, he's just not motivated, and it's like, I had a psychiatrist one time. I referred a client of mine to and he called me back and said she's having problems. She's not motivated, and I already had a history with this guy. And what I said to him, what do you think we do for a living? It's like that's what we do. It's like no, I mean, everything we do has to do with helping people with that and to break these things. And that's what you do in your books. You take things that we could take for granted and also beat ourselves up because we're not doing it, and you break it down into the component parts so that there's a way to get there. So that's what I do with that. So, but
I'm just
I'm
surprised you
glad
didn't
to be
say,
reminded.
Tom, I'm surprised you didn't say no shit. Like, of course they're not motivated. Look where they're coming from.
Right.
Like,
Well, I thought I might be able to help that guy, but
Tom, what are the 7 components you talk about in your book?
I'm looking at some now. It's like acknowledging the multiplicity, the committee inside, identifying the should monster, the negative aspect that's in charge, understanding the source of that negativity. That's family of origin stuff like that. Then you get to the good stuff, discovering the what I call the decision maker. We got to get, you got to separate from, that should monster. We got, just like we recover from what's toxic, and so we can recover our authentic selves. So the idea is that once we can put, what's toxic is substances, sure, but all the stuff in our head, we get it back. And there's a lot of emphasis in the book about just finding that decision maker. I mean, you could talk about that from lots of different angles. I think probably since I wrote the book, you could say some of it's synonymous with, and it probably is even in the book. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but inner parent, but that adult part of you, to me, it's very much emotional sobriety. It's taking responsibility for yourself. You guys, you say that nobody's coming. Herb has a version of that, which is we're the ones coming. And I was just noticing the other day that actually I have a thing in there in my book, Simple Truth, that says when it comes to the inner child, it's like there's good news and bad news, and it's the same news, which is you're the one, you're up. And so that decision maker is that place. And so one of the things, hopefully we do a good job in the book, is helping people understand that it's natural to feel inadequate in that role. And then the rest of it is there's a chapter on building the power. Chapter I really thought was important was learning to succeed, because a lot of people do not know how to let themselves succeed. It's like we have a block against it. And then the last one, of course, is my favorite, which is just practice, 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 practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a
I think what's important, see what I think is so relevant here is that should monster is the part that's putting these expectations on us.
Oh, yeah.
And it's always that the violation of the expectations that are causing the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. This becomes so important, because if you have a hard time letting go of those shoulds, it means that you're too identified with that part of you.
Well, you're not going to be able to get on your own side. I mean,
right.
that's the thing. We have to, and I think any one of us would tell you, like, don't worry. It doesn't have to be a unanimous vote on your committee. It's like, don't wait around for that for anything. I can't get a unanimous vote on where to go to dinner, that's why the decision-making part of that is there. It's like the decision maker is somebody that you empower to just step. It's really somebody coming in and saying, I'm in charge, and here's what we're going to do. It's an educated decisions, educated choices. I'm considering all of this information, and we're going to take this. And it's like, tough love. And it's like, it feels dangerous for a lot of people when we start letting ourselves succeed. We're waiting for that other shoe to drop. We're waiting. We're watching our back, because it's like we feel like we're doing something wrong.
Well, it's just self-esteem again. If I don't feel worthy of success and love, then I'm going to continue to be beating myself up, and going to undermine.
What I had to learn, Tom, was I had a lot of shoes, right? So like the other shoe can drop, but I've got plenty more to
that's good. I like it, Tom.
I got plenty of shoes. I'm waiting for the other shoes to drop. I got plenty more where that came from. They're gonna drop. What I liked when you talked about the practice piece is like, I thought that just getting sober would kind of like open the door to, self-forgiveness and motivation, right? And it was like, that actually got worse, because if the voice got louder, without,
well, it kind of opens the door, because it gives you access, but what you don't know is that's where the work begins.
Exactly.
Yeah
It's
messy.
And it is messy, and that instinct to discount what got me to this point, right? So like that phrase, well, my best thinking got me here. Yeah, you're in recovery. Like you made it. You got in the front door. Like
I like that.
That's your best thinking. That's that's the inner spirit, like pushing through.
I love that, Tom. I love it when we take an old AA saying and give it a little twist. That's good. It's fun.
My experience with this is that it's a process, and I didn't know that at the beginning, only in retrospect.
Right.
And it was after I had been introduced at 5 years of sobriety to the step process, despite all my learning in psychology and all my therapy, and which was all helpful building to, and all the work I did in AA up to that point, but it wasn't effective until I saw in the resentment inventory. That's where you started out, Alan, in terms of the resentment
Yep.
and forgiveness. I think self-forgiveness is a pretty sophisticated experience and terminology, and I addressed it only after I had, in fact, experienced the forgiveness where I was able to forgive my father. I was able to forgive, and I was able to be forgiven. But I didn't know that was what the process of the ninth step was in terms of the final conclusion. But in order to, and I've just had a recent experience with attempting to explain this in the context, I think is what Tom was just saying, talking about trauma, or maybe it was you, Tom, the other Tom. And that was, there's so many moving parts here. And just recently, within this last 6 months, I was attempting to explain taking responsibility. And yes, you were a victim. Yes, you were victimized. It is true. But you're not now. And it created some commotion in the group because they couldn't see around the corner of the event of their history, because they hadn't gone through the process. They were just confronted with the trauma and the victim stance that they have worn all their lives and never been able to see any space around that, not being able to process. Today, I'm not a victim. Oh, absolutely, I was betrayed. Oh, absolutely, I had some trauma. Oh, absolutely. But it's not happening now. It's not, and I had to go through a process, and there's no good news here in the sense of the timing, because it's a long period of acknowledging what Alan was talking about, acknowledging, getting to see the truth of the unenforceable rules, the truth of the lie, of the delusion of my beliefs. I mean, I was so invested in it, it had been part of my warp and woof of my personality. And literally, I had to get a new pair of glasses through this process, a gift, not of insight, but a gift of leadership of a mentor and an experience leading me through repetitive visiting, revisiting, and some prayer that went along with it. And the other part was to take a look at the motives. Beliefs were one thing, but the motives, and I got underneath that at about 7, 8 years of sobriety, getting underneath to see how corrupt my motives were, how manipulative and so subtle that all of this was, that I couldn't see it. And finally had the experience, but it was a process of finishing the 4 through 9 and then revisiting it again, and not redoing the amends, but making some new amends, which deepened the experience of the impact of my behavior on other people was embarrassing and overwhelming. And eventually, and I'm not sure exactly when it was, but I realized that by the time I finished the ninth step, I had been released. I had brought forgiveness to other people. But in the process of doing that, like the St. Francis prayer said, I actually, and the definition in the dictionary, as I looked it up, of forgiveness is a decision to release. A decision to release. It's connected to the action that Tom was talking about. But very much, and you made the connection between that and emotional sobriety, that acknowledging of the truth, the acceptance of the impact, and then the adjustment. It's kind of like the triple A. Yeah.
Yep.
The biggest part is accepting personal responsibility. It's just so huge.
Yeah, what was I getting out of not forgiving, right? There was a present value, as sick as it might have been, but there was a present value that I got out of not forgiving what had happened in the past. I got to throw in the cloak of victimhood and not take responsibility for my current behavior. And, there's layers to it that I didn't realize until I started, doing the work and coming to some understanding of, that all I was doing was, poisoning my current relationships with the not letting go of the past.
Well, I want to bring in, lest I forget it, in the context where you guys are all the psychologists and et cetera, about self, et cetera, et cetera. Let's not forget, the assumption in the big book is that I'm powerless in the final analysis to get rid of the resentment. I can understand it. I can take the actions around it, but I'm powerless to actually release it and let it go. And there's a specific prayer practice in between the column 3 and the column 4 instructions that I didn't see until I was like 10 years sobriety, which allowed me to practice a prayer for my own healing, not for theirs, but for my own healing. And as a result of that, was given the gift of a release from the burden of whatever the anger and the source of it was in me, and it never returned. And it never returned.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because that whole thing, that's where one of the things, anything we do, and when we're kind of talking about what the process is, you're talking, not mistaken the thing. Again, this is where the should monster can get involved in here. Oh, this is just something you're supposed to do. It's,
Exactly.
then we're just back in church. That just feels like I'm just back in church listening to the Sunday school teacher. It's like, that's not going to get me any place I haven't already been. But that's what I like what you said just there. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that writing. I just wanted to share with you guys. It's very brief. It's not a lot. So this day of the creative writing workshop, this trauma workshop, we were supposed to talk about our body as a sanctuary or as a safe place. We were supposed to write about that. So this is what I said. Is your body a safe space? He asks, half expecting we will say yes. But the question is wrong for me. The real question is my body safe with me? Not is my body a safe place, but is my body safe with me? And I go, no, it's not. As I say this, I feel with sorrow and regret. I have not honored you. I've abused you, dismissed you, and neglected you. You clearly told me what you felt about my behavior, and I ignored you or acted with total disregard for your safety. I poured alcohol and other drugs into you to the point where you'd black out. The following morning, you'd protest. What have you done to me? My body says. And I'd ignore your pleas. I placed you in harm's way over and over and over again without second thought. You were never safe with me. I abandoned you just like I was abandoned. I lacked empathy for you just like I experienced as a child. I hurt you just like I was hurt. I fucked you over just like I was betrayed and fucked over. I hope it's not too late to make amends to you. I am sorry.
That's good.
I
like it.
Reminds me of that saying, my mind would have killed my body long ago if it didn't need it for transportation.
Oh, I never heard that. That's great.
Oh yeah. I love like
Julia put a great quote in that somebody wrote that she shared with us. So please read it. She says, this person said, and I said to my body softly, I want to be your friend. It took a long breath and replied, I've been waiting my whole life for this.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful? Thanks, Julia. All right, I guess we can open up for a few minutes. You want to do that, Tom, for some shares, and then we'll.
This definitely spoke to me in so many ways. I will do the exercises. I thought of all the ways I hear Herb talking about a set-aside prayer. I had it backwards. I set me aside.
That was good.
What being a fuck up teaches us. I mean, you just hear it wrong. So I set myself aside. And when I was dating someone as a kid, he said, come on, it's okay to swim in the stock tank. Those moccasins won't hurt you. And I jumped in and swam with the freaking water moccasins.
Oh my God.
Do you know that early in my career, I repossessed cars myself? I cut keys and I jumped in them and drove off. What the hell?
Yeah.
Damn.
Anyway, I'm not going to do an inventory here, but let me just say.
That's right on. No,
I'm sorry?
no, right on. I love where you're going with this.
Yeah, I suddenly had this long list of things that I realized how much I set myself aside to just do.
Yeah.
And one other thing, I did some deep trauma work about 6 months ago. And right after that, I got shingles, and the pain is still with me.
Damn.
I think the unfinished piece was the forgiveness. So I'll be writing about that too.
Okay.
Because the timing was right when I did that work. And I haven't been able to figure out or heal or whatever. And I just have the strong feeling it's related. And whether it is or not, I have forgiveness work to do around that. So thank you very much.
I was having dinner with Joe Chisholm tonight, and Joe's a vegan. And Joe looked at me at one point. He says, I've been starting to wonder about what I'm doing. He says, I'm eating so healthy. It's almost like I want to die healthy. It was an interesting comment because it's so paradoxical, isn't it? It's so paradoxical sometimes.
Well, that's what you hear sometimes when somebody dies, you go like, oh yeah, but they were so healthy. We go like, well, not anymore. It's like
A lot of good that did him.
Yeah, this has been a really good meeting, and it's interesting because I've been thinking I have a heck of a lot of resentments that have lasted years and years and years. And, I'll do a step 4 and, for a couple of days or weeks or months, I'm okay, but then they just come back. And the last study I did with Herb was just on a relationship that I had recently gotten out of. And the one thing that was so powerful about this process, and I will be getting back into another study in January, was I recognized in this particular case, it was so much easier to be angry at my ex than to feel some of the other feelings, like the shame and the sadness of, there were kids involved, and, all of a sudden our relationships were cut off. And so it was just to have to sit in some of those other feelings and to have to acknowledge my part. That's what the anger was giving me. So just hearing some of the shares tonight made me think about that and just make me really understand, like, I think it was Tom that said, like, I am getting something out of these resentments, and it's also not really serving me or the people in my life. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this chapter and then doing my own work around it too. Yeah. Thanks everybody.
You ask, if I weren't feeling this, what would I be feeling? It's like, it's a simple question, but it's like, I remember the first time a therapist ever asked me that question. It's like, it's like I almost just fell apart because it just, I mean, and it was anger. It was like, if you weren't feeling this angry, what would you be feeling? And then, because all the feelings underneath there, I mean, the anger was a real feeling, but the other ones that were in there, and I was not comfortable with them. I was more comfortable being angry. Yeah.
Another technique my therapist used with me was when she said, how you feeling, or what are you going through right now? And I'd say, I don't know. And she'd go, well, if you did know, what would it be?
I just tell people to guess. I said, just take a guess. I don't care. When people tell you don't have to forgive, they've just handed you freedom. It's like that. That means when it happens, and you'll be your choice. And it's like you're not making yourself do anything.